Hello, world, and welcome back to another episode of Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name is Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle. And today we're going to be talking about episode 13, which is called Buddhism and Parasitic Processing. So, to begin, as we always do, I'm going to pass it over to Lizelle.
Hello, world. Yes, we're back at Plato today for our opening. I'm reading from what I pronounce as Laches, the dialogue that is all about courage, what courage is. And it ends, it might actually be that I already read it with you, Sarah, because I just love this passage. And I read it this morning for the second time. So it might be that I already shared it, but I think it's appropriate. And of course, there's a specific teacher that I have in mind when I read it. So Socrates speaks. He says, "Indeed, Lysimachus, I should be very wrong in refusing to aid in the improvement of anybody. And if I had shown in this conversation that I had a knowledge which Nicias and Laches have not, then I admit that you would be right in inviting me to perform this duty. But as we are all in the same perplexity, why should one of us be preferred to another? I certainly think that no one should, and under these circumstances, let me offer you a piece of advice." And then this advice is specifically important. "And this needs not go farther than ourselves," he said, but luckily Plato did deem it worthy to write down. "I maintain, my friends, that every one of us should seek out the best teacher whom he can find. First for ourselves, who are greatly in need of one, and then for the youths, that regardless of expense or anything. But I cannot advise that we remain as we are. And if anyone laughs at us for going to school at our age, 42 for me, I would quote to them the authority of Homer, who says, 'Modesty is not good for a needy man.' Let us then, regardless of what may be said of us, concern ourselves both with our own education and that of the youths together." Thus far, our scripture reading.
Yes. And that's on courage.
Yes, John really likes this dialogue. I think he speaks of it a lot. And that the people were like, who shall we go to as teachers on courage and to teach our sons? And then in the end, they conclude that, well, even though Socrates says he doesn't know what he is, he does exemplify it. So it's probably best if they hang out with him. And that's
Nice. Wow, that's just like a whole bunch of brain bending around what's actually discussed in this episode too with the Buddha and being able to participate in the way that the Buddha participated as
yes.
opposed to just learning them as creeds. Yeah.
Really learning from a teacher by participating with the teacher in what is taught instead of just learning propositions, indeed.
So yeah, that's a great lead in from what we were talking about last time, which was all kinds of cognitive science to melt your brain with on higher states of consciousness and awakening experiences and mystical experiences. So then kind of that was all a little bit of justification, as I put it, for why you would listen to somebody that's visited with the higher states of consciousness, like why they, may be onto something. This is kind of this argument that's been developing. And so hence, like, why do people listen to the Buddha?
Okay, yeah. And why would you yourself, I feel like now maybe I shouldn't say it, but I do. Why would you yourself pursue such states? That was also what the whole recap in this episode and then the previous episodes was about. Yeah. It's not so that you can gain some sort of extraterrestrial knowledge, but so that you can be transformed. Get more in contact with reality, realize reality for reality's sake.
Yeah.
D.C. Schlender added.
Man.
Participate in the realization of reality
Mm-hmm.
for reality's sake.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the why. Now we're going to do
that's
the
the why.
how.
Well, we're going to do the Buddha.
The
We're going to
being.
do how would Buddha do it?
Yeah. What would Buddha do? Okay. To get to this highly optimized way of processing information to get a plausible grip on the world, as John Vervaeke would say. Okay, so what he's presenting here is that the Buddha is not giving any propositional claims, or Buddhism itself is not giving any propositional claims about the nature of reality, but these states of higher consciousness justify by optimizing some of our core processing for being in contact with reality for cultivation of wisdom. So this is all still just summary. This is what leads us into the Buddha awakens.
Yes.
And what I have here is like, he's saying, I guess, a couple of reasons that we would be kind of discussing this here. So for bringing about sati, which is a deeper remembering of the being mode, to see through the frustrating futility of modal confusion. And I guess these are the central tenets of Buddhism. And then another thing that we're going to be going into is that the West has completely misunderstood Buddhism as far as Stephen Batchelor and other people are concerned.
Yeah, I know Jung himself also struggled with that. He was like, maybe we should call Jung, because he did write a beautiful intro to the I'm trying to see it, The Secret of the Golden Flower, which is a Taoist text, and he did daily practices with the I Ching. So he was attracted to the Eastern philosophies, but he was very wary of them. And exactly, I think for this reason, because of the interpretation crisis.
Yeah.
Can we really know something if we're not embedded in where it is from, in what it is?
Right, the culture even, but more
Yes.
than that. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really
The
interesting.
way of thinking is completely because your environment does so powerfully shape the way you think that even the way of thinking may be completely, and because we think then in a different way, we interpret it we interpreted Buddhism in this propositional belief thing because that's how the West were trained at the stage when the Buddhism was and other Eastern philosophies were brought over. We were very much propositional in our propositional phase. So then we started interpreting Buddhism as such, as beliefs to
Yeah.
be attached to attach yourself to these beliefs, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
quite funny, ironic.
Yeah, and not
Isn't it
just
ironic?
isn't it ironic? Not just that, the so of course, like, understanding things in the form of creeds, but also just language itself is so limiting, because translating from, the origin, the text, or the origin text and the language of the origin text. So you're not even just taking into consideration, I can't talk today. You're not even just taking into consideration that,
Language.
yeah, right? No, the language barrier for me. The context in that way that you were describing it, um, kind of like culture, can you understand this if you're not really embedded, participating in this? But also there's this language limitation of, he's going to get more into describing what suffering actually means in a little while. But yeah, that is, I mean, it's the problem with astrology too, is when I say Taurus, something comes to mind for me. It's a whole thing. And I'm describing Taurus, but I'm just describing, this was what I was telling you earlier. I'm describing my relationship with Taurus, every way I've experienced Taurus. It's not intrinsic of Taurus what I'm describing. It's just my relationship with this energy. And so other astrologers are going to have different words, not too different. They're going to be pretty similar, but we're just going to have different examples, different stories of being able to describe this energy. And yeah, so there's a lingua franca, there's a language that we're speaking with one another. And that's the issue here with our understanding of Buddhism, is that well, there is an interpretation crisis, as he's put it here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So that then brings to the claims is like, on the one hand, that people say, oh, do it. I'm just going to go to the subject of object immediately. Do it subjectively. Like you said, it's a relationship that you have with the planets. That's quite a subjective way of knowing, because
Totally.
it's relational.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's a transjective way of knowing. I take back saying that it's a subjective way of knowing. I actually think it's a transjective way of knowing. Okay, but so subjective, like you have to participate. You have to, you can only interpret, he says, from within. That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
Which then does have great transformative relevance. But on the other hand, people are say you can only interpret if you're completely outside any tradition. So that's like the academics.
Yeah.
They claim truth and objectivity. Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, he quotes, getting involved, I would lose objectivity if I was to participate in that.
Yes. But can you really know anything if you haven't really experienced it? That's my, I told you I have a little story, personal story here. So
Yeah.
when I was studying theology, I tried kind of like, when I noticed I was losing my faith, I got all panicky. So I tried different traditions, different, I was raised Calvinistic Protestant, but then I tried different like Pentecostal movements and things like that, just to see maybe I can hang on to my faith in some way. And then it didn't work.
Yeah.
But
I know
spoiler
that
alert.
story.
But after I've been one specific tradition, I was in my theology studies, I was asked to do a presentation on a sect, and I got them as the sect. And then after my presentation, the professor said there was only one thing wrong with that it wasn't recorded. Because I went in, and I'm like all in. I go all in if I go into something. So I really get to experience it. And then I go all out. And then I do the academic thing of viewing.
Yeah.
So maybe I've heard this before and kind of try to find my own solution.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm going to do with Neoplatonism. Go all in.
Go all in. Yeah. It's interesting that you're putting it that way, because my instructor for Hellenistic astrology, he's like, forget the outer planets. We're not doing any, because they didn't have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto.
Yeah.
And so even though those are significant to us now and our finding of them has relevance and that kind of thing, they're not part of the original lineup, and they did not get houses assigned to them. So he's like really adamant, not to say that he doesn't use outer planets now, but it was like, get in the mind sight of these ancient Hellenistic astrologers and think from their perspective of, Pluto's not there to work with. So how are you going to describe this energy without Pluto being present? Well, it just so happens that maybe Jupiter in this sign of Pisces or whatever has the same signature, as they call it. It has the same signature. And we also use aspects a lot, which was interesting to hear John start to talk about aspects right at the beginning of After Socrates. Just like aspects are just different ways that the energy can arise. It'll be in a square aspect because two planets are a square to one another. Two planets can be trine to one another, and that's a different aspect. And so those aspects are all descriptions of the same zodiacal wheel with planets in different positions in it. So it's just to say this gem turns in many different ways. So anyway, but yeah, as far as like get in the minds, like go all in. That's what my instructor says to do too with Hellenistic astrology. Go all in, forget the outer planets, whole sign houses.
I personally think that's the only way to truly know anything.
Yeah.
To just go all in. But so I'm on the subjective side, but maybe like that's why I want to make a claim that what you're describing, this relational knowing, is actually transjective.
Yeah.
But
okay, but you got to be selective about astrologers, because some astrologers don't have that relationship with the planets. I've only developed that because of getting back into the mind side of
Yeah.
the ancients. Some people
Yeah.
develop their own kind of understanding of what they think is relational based on their own
Yeah.
understanding, and they recognize patterns, which isn't discrediting their pattern recognition, but it's just saying their scope is their limited scope. Whereas what we're
Mm.
trying to do when we learn Hellenistic astrology or Vedic astrology, when people go really far deep into Vedic
Mm.
astrology, any kind of tradition, when you're trying to study it, it's like, yeah, to get that um,
Mm. Mm.
participatory knowing with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we do sometimes need to talk about the divination and theurgy in Neoplatonism, because that there's so many things popping up in my mind from that when you say that. It's like,
Yeah.
you have to know you have to have an intimate relationship with whatever the means of divination is for you.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's mechanical and
Exactly. It won't work.
not
The
real.
magic isn't there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The divinity isn't there.
Yeah.
Um, but let's not get too after Socrates.
I know. Sorry. That was an aside. So with
Oh,
this
yeah.
whole interpretation crisis when trying to understand Buddhism is that there is, you said subjective and objective. He also says, like, as far as the subjective, transformative relevance, and then
Yes.
the objective is desire to get at a truth.
Yeah. So that brings us back to the sophist and the natural philosophers that he started with, almost the awakening from the meaning crisis series. Like what the people Socrates had to deal with. The natural philosophers were the people
Yeah.
who had this truth, this objective truth. And then the sophist had this transformative relevance, but they lacked the truth part. And
Yeah.
the natural philosophers lacked the the transformative relevance part. So both are needed,
Yeah.
and that's where John then got the whole transjective idea from. So although he doesn't use that word here, he said it's all. Well, no, this is my words. He uses the word beyond, and then I said it's all about getting beyond.
Yeah.
Everything seems to be about getting beyond good and evil, beyond this and that, beyond the paradox. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The gray area in between.
It's not even in between. It's
Yeah, because
it's
that would indicate there was two distinct
yeah.
separate
It's
entities.
quite elusive, actually. I feel
Mm-hmm.
this beyond.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. All encompassing.
yes, yes, but that's exactly it. The beyond is all encompassing.
Which
It's
makes
not
it,
in between. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Um, okay, is that where we want to leave it with the transformative relevance and the desire to get at the truth, that the subjective is many interpretations, it's myopic, can be parochial, he says. So it's just like both of these kind of get you to too narrow-minded, I think is what,
Yes.
yeah, the
Yeah. Yeah.
thesis.
Yeah. So we still have the interpretation crisis. It's
Yes.
not solved.
Yes, it's
And he
not
does mention
solved.
it connects to the meaning crisis.
Right.
I don't know if he goes in exactly how it connects to the meaning
Well, he
crisis.
says
If he
it
did.
interacts with the meaning crisis. It's deeply involved with the project of recovering how we can cultivate wisdom and enhance meaning in our lives.
Okay.
So he says it.
All right.
That must be true. Uh, so okay,
Well,
but
he is the
when we
meaning
were,
crisis expert. Yeah.
what'd you say?
I said, well, he is a meaning crisis expert. So on this, at least, if he said it, it must be true.
Okay, we can trust that to an extent. Um. Okay,
If we're going to
so
trust anybody.
if we're gonna trust anybody, you're right. I mean, we have this is like the yeah. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna leave it there. We could just go on with hooks. Okay, so Bachelor has the within tradition, and then outside of tradition. Those are the people that study the text. But it's the fixation that needs to be broken through, is what he says here. The Buddhism without beliefs. was the book
Mm,
that he is quoting when he
mhm.
says, trying to understand Buddhism as a set of beliefs is a reduction to it being a possession of beliefs, which I thought was really
Mm.
nice.
Which for me personally, as I mentioned, was powerful, because when I say I've lost my faith in faith, I think I mean I lost my faith in beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
because my actions still speak of faith, and I am a deeply religious person. There's
Yeah.
no way getting away from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's but yeah.
Well, and he even says here ideologies are attempts of meaning making, but they fail because meaning making machinery is not at the level of propositional knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to kind of like how you sound crazy when you try to describe something that mystical or spiritual, whatever word we're going to use. You don't have the words for it. There's no
Mm-mm.
language. In most cases, it is ineffable anyways. Even if you wanted to have the
Mhm.
words for it, you wouldn't be able to come up with anything.
Mm. And by the time you have the words, it almost feels as if it's dead.
Yeah, it kills it.
Yeah.
Kind of kills it.
So
Well, I was going to say, which is why he says we need to see Buddhism as existential teaching. The Four Noble Truths. He says they can help afford the kind of transformation or this kind of transformation. And the real emphasis on like Stephen Batchelor's work was to really get to this point of the point is not to believe them, it is to help us to reenact the Buddha's enlightenment. And so I told you about this guy. I was watching a video and he kept saying we are emotionally rehearsing things, but this is just like anytime we're doing something in the virtual space, especially online, it makes it really easy to method act or become a different personality, but then to like incorporate that into your actual life. And it gives you
mhm,
the
mhm,
um feedback. That's the nice thing about this virtual space is I could pretend all day to be anything, but if I'm not getting feedback from other people affirming that, and this gets us into interesting territory as far as culture goes right now that I won't go into, but it just had the I said those words. So yeah. um yeah, identity is interesting.
the identity is another one that we can talk about for a very long time. But
Yeah, yeah. Okay, but the point here was to enact enlightenment, to
yes,
be like the
rehearse.
Buddha.
Welcome to our dress rehearsal.
Yes. And this is where or I should say, John changes or proposes the change from the Four Noble Truths to the Four Ennobling Provocations.
Yes, cool. I just want to say, because it's very real for me, um, my biggest fear for a very long time has been to become enlightened. So I don't want to reenact the Buddha's awakening. Well, the people who know me, when I say that to them, they burst out laughing and say, I
Yeah.
really don't have to worry about becoming enlightened. So it's, yeah. But I like the idea of being ennobled. I
Mm-hmm.
like that idea.
Yes. Feels like I'm being knighted.
Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about fears, this whole idea of provoking people into the truth, um,
Yes.
because he says the provocations, and this is actually something that, well, we're going back to after Socrates, but I'm not going to stay there too long. But it's something that keeps getting said about Socrates, or was initially being said, is like you don't know whether he's really helping people or if he's a troll. If, what's the intention there, and there's some things in my astrology that would indicate to me that I also have this superpower, maybe a curse that looks like a blessing of provoking
Or a
people
blessing
into
that looks
what's
like a
that?
curse.
Yeah.
Or a blessing that looks like a curse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but
Of
it's like
provoking people.
of provoking people, of like presenting things to people that's kind of shocking. And this goes back to my fear of I don't shouldn't say fear, but my recognition, I guess, my reverence for the uncertainty of other people and how people just introduce uncertainty into my life. Like I could be at the ashram up on the mountain and peaceful and the wind chimes going and everything's nice. But it's not incorporating that learning that, into a life. So with, provoking people, well, that's it's either like to provoke or to be provoked. Like the uncertainty of other people provokes me. So that's something that I'm learning to, take as, I guess, these disruptions too, of having disruption enter, and then I've got to reorganize the whole understanding of everything that I, know.
Choose your provocations also wisely.
Okay, yes, okay, good. Because those are ultimately, those are your loves or your masters. Yeah.
Yes.
Which we
What
haven't
provokes
really like clearly stated in the recording
no.
what we mean by
No, we'll
that.
come back to that.
Yeah, because we'll
This is
come
like
back to that.
this is like this is a small taste of what is to come.
Foreshadowing. Yeah. Little
Foreshadowing.
foreplay. Okay. So, right, because he goes into this one of the ennobling provocations, as we'll call them for these purposes, that all of life is suffering. And I think we have a lot to say on this. Anyway, he also had quite a lot to say about this. So I'm just going to hand it over to you to really, start with all of life is suffering, which is the first of the Four Noble Truths.
Okay, so this is the big thing that John reinterpreted for me that made my view of Buddhism radically different, which is I think was John's whole intention. Because I was taught, I was literally, I actually studied comparative religion as I did an extra degree on comparative religion when I was studying theology. And so I was taught academically, basically all of these religions. So I got it as propositions and all is suffering. And I was like, yeah, because of what we will get to later, this whole, if you view that structure, if you have experienced bad and then you expect bad. So if my perspective was, if you see all of life as suffering, then you will expect all of life to be suffering, and you will experience all of life as suffering. And I don't want to do that. That's not my, But he says, he goes then like, no. The word suffering is not what you think it is. It is not pain. It is a loss of agency, entrapment. And that is indeed bad. And he uses the Mad Queen. Oh no, the Mad Queen was my words. He uses mad, the word mad, which I think you have something to say about. It was originally, oh, that's so mad. Oh no, I can't do a British accent.
No,
You
that was
did
great.
really
That was
well.
perfect.
And we now see it as angry.
Yeah.
So he uses the word mad as then how the original meaning of words got a little bit lost, as is with the meaning of suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, because then with that example, he says because anger can render one insane, and that's the cause of madness. This anger is the cause of madness. So in that way, mad is actually associated with angry, but it's actually meant to describe this insanity. So that was the reference to the Mad Queen. That was kind of the imagery that you got, and the imagery that I got was like a British person saying, "Oh, that's so mad." So, and we just don't use it like that in the States. In fact, when we hear somebody say it, it's like, "Oh, that's endearing." And then so he's mentioning this idea of suffering and the dukkha, which I like this image of a wheel being off center on its axis much more than a dislocated shoulder. That just kept bothering me. But the wheel being off center in its axis.
Dislocated shoulder will keep bothering you.
Yes, so it's a self-destructive. The self is destroying itself.
That is much better indeed. Because the poor shoulder, it's not his fault that he's dislocated, but the wheel does. If you keep running on a wheel that's not properly, it's gonna. It's true what you said.
Yeah.
Like I said, realize that all of your life is threatened with the loss of agency and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what dukkha is, self-destruction.
Yeah.
But it's that loss of suffering is that you undergo that loss of agency. You don't act, you suffer. You don't act love, for instance, you suffer love.
Yeah.
You can suffer love. He goes, and you can suffer joy,
Joy.
but you
Yeah.
can also act joy.
Yeah. I'm just like reading back through the monkey grabbing the pitch and the entrapment metaphor. So it's not um he says that the monkey is not in pain, it's entrapped.
Yeah,
Which is
yeah. That's
yeah.
mm,
It's like sticky substance. It's not painful for me, but hey, I can't get away from it. And now
mm,
let me try to
mm.
use this hand to get off of it. And yeah, it's not painful. It's just like it's frustrating and sticky. Mm.
Yeah, and then he speaks about in what way are we entrapped, and then that's when this whole when he says again the words that we have heard him say so often, the very processes that are making you adaptively intelligent also make you vulnerable to self-deceptive, self-destructive behavior.
And it's funny because we keep writing it down. That's what's going to be ingrained.
Well, but that has something to do with wisdom. Remember, he keeps
Yeah.
also saying, like, if you can reverse that or see through that, then that's a way to wisdom. I think that's why we keep writing it down.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot here about like pattern building,
Yeah,
recognizing pattern, and like this is us participating in a recognition of, yeah, philosophy in life and as it's really happening. So,
yeah,
yeah, I really like the repetition. I like the
yeah,
sati of um for me, when I would go to class, I would record my professors, which I wasn't allowed to do, but it's okay. None of them are listening. But I would record them and I would also write down the notes. And when I would go back and listen through, I would rewrite my notes out. But before I could do that, I was reading my notes and I would remember, oh, yeah, that was the part where he went and shut the lights for the projector to come on. And
yeah,
like I would like, it was like a
yeah.
episodic memory of the whole process of taking notes. It
Yes.
wasn't just the notes that I had taken that I was trying to memorize. I was like, okay, yeah, where did this spatially happen in my mind?
The
Yeah, go
reason
ahead.
why we probably keep writing this down
Hmm.
is because we haven't internalized it yet.
True. Yeah.
I,
Yeah,
I,
because it
I,
wouldn't be something we would pick up on so much.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's something that we still feel we
me
need
too.
to internalize this,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
which kind of makes me feel stupid because why haven't I internalized it yet?
Okay, but this one
The,
particularly, this is a difficult thing to continue to do that I think you and I are pretty good at, like at least practiced at, maybe not good at yet, but practiced at, of really taking a meta perspective of what I'm starting to fall in love with. And then
yeah,
I've like really got to put the lens on it and because I'm prepared for any rug pull moment now. That's kind of the
yeah,
thing. It's like
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
almost more prepared for the rug to get pulled than I
yeah,
am for things to stay
yeah,
as they are. And that can lead you down a
yeah.
dark, weird place too. But yeah, um that's kind of what I'm
But like I
experiencing.
said, I'm going all in New Platonism now, so that then when I have lost my faith in New Platonism, I can analyze it academically. So
Yeah.
I'm all in for the rock pool moment. Like,
Yeah.
bring it on. It's
Yep.
like,
Yeah. Pull this
but
rug.
first I need to feel this rock. I need to smell this rock,
Yeah.
experience it, and then go ahead and pull
Which is
it.
so interesting when we think about this compared to the scientific method and how that is actually to prove the thing wrong. When you're developing a hypothesis, it's in order to kind of
Oops.
disprove something.
Mm,
Whereas in this surrender, this becoming very vulnerable to something being able to overtake you, allowing
mhm,
it, knowing deep down, I still have agency to pull myself out of this
mhm,
if I need to. And that's
mhm.
that cable for the cave
Yeah,
diving example. It's like, zoop, can pull
yeah,
myself right out of it. So, yeah,
yeah.
that's really cool.
Yeah. Or knowing that eventually you will get to the other side of the
Yeah.
cave. You
Yeah.
just need to go through it, and
Yeah.
you will
Yeah.
get there.
Right.
It's I once did a parkour or some, I don't know. It's like this whole thing in trees. Like there's a lot of trees, and then they link
Zip
it
line.
with, yeah, but it's not just zip lines. It's like
Okay.
things that you have to walk over. So there's this whole course that you do. But when you get to the new course, you have a cable, and then you put your
Yeah.
cable in, and once you're on, there's no going back. You
Right.
have to go forward. And that came to mind. It's like you're in it now.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go through it to get to the other side. And
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
but
thrilling.
anyway,
I like that.
it's thrilling. I had 2 friends behind me and 2 in front of me encouraging me to go, because I'm afraid of heights.
Oh,
So it was terrifying,
yeah.
but I did it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but
Mm,
this even like, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a physical thing. Like yesterday, I need to go talk to this guy about a job that my dad's trying to set up for me. And there's always anxiety with those kinds of things. And
mm,
I'm sitting
mm,
like having the conversation with myself and like, you recognize who you are. You're not looking for a job, that kind of thing. Like feel into the courage, the bravery that it takes to interact with somebody else that's presenting this
mm,
uncertainty in your
mm,
life. Yeah, it's probably going to
mm,
throw you off. It's going to be a disruption. Um, but like it's better than sitting here without a job in most cases. I actually
mm,
have been enjoying my philosophy time, but yeah.
mm. Well, the job may be looking for you. So
That's what I'm opening myself up to. Is that was why I
yeah.
took the courage, the bravery, instead of saying, it's okay, I'm building my own business. I don't need anybody else's, help. But it's like this guy has a business and maybe he could use
Yeah,
my help in his business. It's a small business.
exactly.
And so yeah, like it seems like life is calling out to me to be like, here's a new arena. You want to be an agent?
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, so you were saying the very process that makes us adaptively intelligent also makes us vulnerable to self deceptive, self destructive behavior. So now, what he's kind of going to start describing is the way that the brain anticipates bad events or how we can get stuck in this cycle, this addictive cycle of interpreting events as bad.
Um, I actually feel very sympathetic towards my brain, or even compassion towards my brain, because he says here your brain is always trying to fit you to the environment. He's just really trying to be nice, to help me survive. And yeah, and how he does that is he uses heuristics, and then John speaks of a few heuristics. I don't know that I wrote it down. I don't think so.
Representative heuristic and then availability
Yes.
heuristic. Was that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
So the representative is that it sticks out in your mind that it was a bad event. Like, oh gosh, that thing happened and now yeah, so your brain's kind of starting to anticipate the in the future there's a high probability because this sticks out in the mind that a bad event
Mm,
will happen. And he says that this interacts often with the availability heuristic, which is judging how probable an event is by how
mhm,
easy you can remember a similar event occurring. So two
mhm,
different kinds. One sticks out in the mind. The other one is how similar it is to an event that has
mhm.
already occurred.
Yeah. And then on the other side, because this is the heuristic side of things happening, on the other side, there's also the encoding specificity. So you just experience something bad. So you're in a bad mood. So then you see
Mm-hmm.
with bad mood or expecting bad mood glasses.
Mm-hmm.
So that also then uh, really plays it in this whole vicious circle. That is
Yeah. Because,
addiction.
well, this also goes when I was talking about how I would record my professors, it the brain does not store just information. It stores how we are fitted to the environment or the context.
Mhm,
And so when I was
mhm,
talking about like me taking notes and remembering where I was in the room visually when I was taking the notes, or wherever you are when you learn something,
mhm,
that all is to be taken into consideration to the environment within which
mhm,
that
mhm,
bad event took
mhm,
place.
mhm,
You remember more about it, I think, like within the body than we realize we remember.
mhm, mhm.
this like triangle here that he's got kind of makes us feel like we're doomed. Is that where he says we're doomed?
Yeah, it's not even a triangle. It's like a
Okay.
lot of things. That's a
I
loop.
hate his
A loop. We're
diagrams.
stuck in this loop,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the loop makes us feel like we're doomed. If you program the loop with something
Doomed.
bad happened,
Yeah.
and that's why I mentioned before what I like to do is reframe.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I notice that even when something bad happens, because bad shit does happen,
Mm-hmm.
reframe that. Like, okay, um,
I have
I
one.
can't think of an example. Oh, you have an example.
Yeah, because I got a parking ticket. Well, maybe this isn't a good reframing, but I got a parking ticket when I was volunteering at the community garden downtown. And because of the astrological transits that are going on, I've just kind of like, I haven't been expecting anything bad to happen because that gets me into that doom mindset.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've been thinking is like, yeah, expect the unexpected, like, be ready for
Mm-hmm.
anything. And so I get this parking ticket and I texted with the lead gardener because she was like, oh, I hope you didn't get that during the volunteering. We have petty cash. We can cover it if you need. And I was like, I was just sitting there thinking, like, if this ticket is the worst thing that I get during this transit, I'll take it. I'll take a $10 parking ticket because the way that the
Yeah,
transits look right now is that shit should be going down and it's not. And this is like, and then that very same day, so I got the parking ticket. I was running errands for my dad and I pulled up and it was a train going by. And I was like, it's fine. I'll take it. If it's just a train, that's fine. So that's kind of a little bit of reframing anyway.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, because you take the bad and you like put it in a context,
Mm-hmm.
and then because of the context that you put it in, it's not that bad
Yeah.
because really bad shit could have happened. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a really bit of a reframing, but it is a positive reframing in the sense that you keep feeling positive.
Yeah.
So that's so at least your specificity, your encoding specificity
It's
is
hard.
positive. So
Yeah.
yeah, that is yeah. Yeah.
It's that's kind of one of the benefits to zooming out to the planetary level is that everything seems small when you zoom out to the cosmic level. It's like, okay, I stubbed my toe. It's, it's bad, but it's not nearly as bad as there's a asteroid headed towards our
Yeah.
planet, you know.
Yeah. We're gonna get a big stumping toe event.
Be on the lookout. Okay, but this is great because it leads us right into all of this is interacting with confirmation bias, which is an adaptive strategy. We tend to only look at information that supports our belief, right? So that's what I mean. Like
Mm.
more often than not, that's what I'm doing with astrology. It's like a little bit of confirmation bias.
But when you were speaking of science and how you try to disprove things like what John mentioned here, it's just too difficult. I
Yeah.
mean, we have to act in the world, and usually we don't have like um, years to make a decision. We usually have to make it like this,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's much easier just to go with confirmation instead of like trying to disprove something, because yeah, if you want to disprove something, really disprove it, you have to test everything, and
Yeah.
that's just not available to us, that option. So
Right.
it's not a bad thing, confirmation bias, and all the
Right.
biases can be it's what makes you highly adaptable.
Yeah, we're still trying to get that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it's I
but
mean
I'm kind of at a place I don't mind if I'm bullshitting myself a
me
little bit.
neither. Well, I think that that's because but we're like prepared for the rug pull, whereas
Exactly.
in my country, the
um,
confirmation bias around people's politics and news in general, it's just not wanting to go and research it on their own. And me too. I don't want to go research everything on my own. That's why I would pick like particular independent media,
yeah,
analysts
yeah,
or reporters or investigative journalists that I like that but I trust them because I watched them and I listen to conversations that they have. And so I've built this kind of, it's the same thing that I felt with Joe Rogan for so many years when I was listening to his podcast, was like, you feel like you're friends with them because they're having a conversation. Same thing maybe that people feel like with us, like, or when we're having the coven talks, or, that kind of thing. People relate with that, and they start to build up a certain understanding, a knowing of us. And so therefore there's a little bit more trust. And so, yeah, my confirmation bias, and like you said, like maybe it's not necessarily always a bad thing, but all of that encoding specificity and the heuristics that we were talking about are interacting with this confirmation bias. So that's what he was trying to say here, that this adaptive strategy that we tend to only look at information that supports our beliefs.
But it's better to look at least for information that support our beliefs than just hanging around in your own little bubble. If I can ask you, hey, do you also see that? Then if you say yes, then I'm a little bit more secure in what I'm seeing. Then just that becomes at least a little probable.
A little bit probable.
I would say.
Yeah. Well, there's some point in here where, because this drawing just got out of control. And so he's like, it's so bad that they had to like put up a digitized version, but the probability is great, is what he says. And then that leads to anxiety. So I guess the probability is great that an event will be bad, or a bad event could reoccur, or like being stuck in this loop is interacting with the confirmation bias, which is telling us that the probability is great, and that gives us anxiety.
But that's coming back to the whole, if you see all of life suffering, that's the problem. If you expect the bad thing, you're going to become a bit anxious, and being in an anxious state is not the optimal state to be in cognitively. So you're going to make poor decisions, probably. You're going to act poorly, or not too optimally, and then bad things are going to happen. So you're going to reinforce your own beliefs. It's actually so scientific. I mean, people make this like so spiritual, like, oh, you attract things by, but no, it's very scientific. You act what you believe. That's what you do, and then it what you act manifest, because you realize reality. It's and so you don't want to realize reality with the idea that reality is always bad or suffering. At least I don't. Maybe some people do, but
sadistic masochists.
No. All is love. I'll make a new religion. All is love.
Oh, I get. I'm joining. Sign me up. Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's even like going back to the scuba diving example. You can't fix a problem if you're freaking out. That's part of the rescue diving example. Not that instructor was doing a very good job, but forcing people to recover from their weight belt being loosened, or their goggles, like you need to be able to do all of that. So yeah, if I'm anxious about the fact that I can't see, I might not breathe, or I might try to breathe through my nose, or, like I'm just not going to do anything properly. I may not even go for the goggles first. But this is why I really love the certifications that I've gotten, even though they've not served me in any kind of way, because I haven't gone back out to scuba. I haven't done anything with my wilderness first responder, but just being tactically trained to be able to, that's most of what training is like, take a breath, calm, like do things very calmly. Most of the advice that I get in these tactical training courses is breathe and then act.
So I'm also certified. I'm also a certified scuba diver, but I also don't do it really much. Yeah. But
that's the dream.
I've only swum in water that's like you can see the surface, so it's like really safe. But indeed, I freaked out at a certain point that I got water in my goggles, so I had to clear it, and the instructor showed like, yeah, it's cool, it's clear. But I tried to breathe through my nose, and I couldn't breathe, and I was like, oh, I can't breathe. So I was like, And I just went up, but slowly, because I was trained. But you freak out. You just can't think when you freak out.
Yeah.
My ex, because we did it together, and he's 1.9 meters, which you know how tall I am, so that's okay. But we were practicing in the pool for the first time, and he almost drowned in the pool because he didn't. The pool was I could stand in the pool, and the pool was he just didn't think to stand on his feet. That's how
Right.
freaked out he was.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you freak out,
So
you
much
just
can go
don't think.
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you just, because everything can go wrong, you spiral because things are going wrong. And it's like,
Yeah.
I can't get anything under control.
Yeah.
So there's that overwhelm of the amount of information that's outside of us. And then that anxiety of focusing in and honing in on this idea that events are going to be bad. So he says this thing about cognition needs to be automatic. Because otherwise, like, we just can't process all that data at once.
Yeah.
But we
It's self-organizing.
misjudge. Sorry.
Self-organizing automatically.
Self-organizing. Yeah. So the quote that I have is, we misjudge probabilities because of our heuristics, but we can't do without them.
Mm.
Which I think is interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's the same quote. The very processes that make us,
Yeah.
but it's just different words.
Definitely something in there for us, Sarah. We still need to learn this lesson.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I don't like learning that lesson very much. So
it
I've
feels,
learned
it
it a
feels,
couple of times.
I can feel it around my heart area. I really feel the lesson. I'm like, oh,
Lovely.
fuck. Here
Oh,
it's coming
fuck.
again.
I trust your heart, so I'm prepared now. Yes, all of life is threatened by dukkha. It's not that everything we do is painful or distressing. It's that every time we exercise intelligent agency, we are making ourselves vulnerable to parasitic processing.
Yes.
I love how he used intelligent agency here because, of course, my mind went to Central Intelligence Agency, like CIA. Anytime you exercise intelligent agency, you're making yourself vulnerable to parasitic processing. Imagine that. There's some encoding here. I hear the
Picked up.
sirens.
Yeah,
So
it's
confirmed.
an ambulance.
Yeah.
Like I told you, I'm next to the only one of the few big roads in Amsterdam. So if anyone needs to get somewhere quickly, they have to take this road. That's the unfortunate part of.
Well, my confirmation
Well,
bias tells me to take that as confirmation. Okay.
be careful of the call of the sirens, though.
Ah, shit. Okay, you got me. Oh, man. I love playing on words. All right. So we got a schema for what depression looks like. That's what he makes
Yes.
available here, I think, because we're going into this parasitic processing. So MIT
Yeah.
developed a schema for what depression looks like. It takes up life within you and causes you to lose agency, is what he says.
I wonder if the same could be said about being too optimistic, like we are. Like that we also not necessarily see truth because we have this optimistic bias. It just doesn't feel bad. So
Right.
we're not taking pills for it.
Well, it
But
doesn't seem to cause us to lose agency, is where my
that's
first
true.
mind went to.
That is true. That is true because you're actually more alert. You're more receptive.
Right.
And
Participating. Yeah.
Eagerly even.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm.
But I like that mind experiment too, because I always like to flip it like that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and your options don't decline.
Right.
It actually opens up because people tend to respond positively towards smiles.
Yes. Okay, and then this is interesting. I really like this thinking of I guess mind or consciousness as a complex, self-organizing, adaptive system. If
Oh,
you
it's
try to
gorgeous.
intervene, the rest of the system reorganizes itself around that intervention. It can adapt and preserve itself as you try to destroy it.
It's gorgeous. That's why I say I feel empathy almost with my mind, because it's just trying to survive.
So that leads us into Mark Lewis, because the mind is just trying to survive. His Memoirs of an Addicted Brain is a book that's recommended here.
Well, the action pattern is just trying to survive within addiction, I would say.
Yeah, action pattern, and it makes me think of algorithm. The action pattern, like the code just wants to survive. That algorithm is just going to continue. So Mark Lewis, he says, was an addict and then went into neuroscience. So the idea here is that addiction is a loss of agency, and that's measured by how dysfunctional they become.
I just want to mention that John talks about the fact that we think of addictions as being chemical, and then he goes into like various reasons why it's not.
Yeah.
And I love the sentence. It's a beautiful, he says something like, it's a beautiful theory, but it has the one unfortunate feature of being fake.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yeah.
Just one unfortunate feature. Yes, I have this car for you. There's just one unfortunate feature. There's no engine.
Yeah.
All right. So Mark is actually challenging, like you said, that standard model of addiction, which is that there's this chemical that's a biophysical chemical dependency, and we suffer if we don't have the chemical, which is this overwhelming compulsion. But he points out that you can get addicted to things like gambling, and that most people even end up giving up their addictions in their 30s. Both of my grandparents and my dad and my papa, my late papa, all quit their addictions to drinking, to smoking, just cold turkey, as they put it. Yeah, just one day. And I believe them, but the way that they tell the story is like everybody's got the same story of, yeah, I just threw the pack of cigarettes away and I never smoked another one. And I don't know that like it's like whole like completely true, but they don't smoke. So, you know, and so everybody in my family has this story of I just quit. So it stands true in my experience that most people quit their addictions in their 30s.
I had a friend who I went through the process with. She just stopped smoking. She's like, yeah, no, I stink when I smoke, so I'm just going to stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I guess I just quit one of my addictions too. So
I'm still working on quitting mine. But I'm yeah, it's interesting to be like aware and to be going through this kind of episode to really kind of get an understanding of things, this patterns of thought even that I'm addicted to, like fantasies or that kind of thing. So yeah, being able to
I think that's even maybe more difficult to quit.
I think it is because it's not in the physical reality, and therefore I can visit with it, especially like for me, like fear really brings up my fantasies because I'm trying to avoid the fear thought. So my mind will want to go think of this scary thing, but I'm going to go to this fantasy instead.
Yeah. It's a coping strategy. It's actually one of the coping strategies that you are taught in some forms of psychology. Instead of thinking of the bad, well, I think actually the Stoics teach it, like instead, or maybe the Epicureans, I can't remember. I remember I read it somewhere there. Instead of thinking of the bad thing, go think of something positive.
Yeah.
And then you overindulge a bit
Right.
there. But
yeah. Yeah.
I still have a lot of addictions to spiral out of as well.
Yeah.
But
well, okay, and then we should make that distinction that of addiction being something that causes you to be dysfunctional. So I think that that's a
Exactly.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's important because not to say that this is a good way to live life either, maybe it is, but I think in Colombia, people that have really like laborious jobs, they'll use coca
Mm.
because it keeps them
Mm.
going for work. And they're not,
Yeah.
and even
Mm.
like somebody was telling a story about a functioning heroin addict that he'd
Mm.
shoot up every day in his truck at work, but
Mm.
worked, and then
Mm.
didn't like use outside of this job that he had. I don't remember who told that story, but for some reason that was coming up. But just yeah, there's a fine line there because functioning alcoholic is not any less addicted. But yeah, just how dysfunctional does this make you?
Mm.
Uh,
The loss of agency. That is important because then
mm,
Mark Lewis has this thing of this reciprocal narrowing,
yeah.
and I think that's a thing when you get so stuck in your fantasies that you don't ever go outside to actually participate in the real world.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
But if your fantasies maybe, because then I'm jumping ahead to the reciprocal opening anagoge.
Yeah.
If your fantasies can actually like inspire you to like, oh, I had this fantasy, maybe I should go chase it, then
Mm-hmm.
it might actually help you with reciprocal opening.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
Well, I mean, I think that's really important to mention too, because we're going back to those four ennobling provocations. And that was something that
mm,
we were mentioning about the second one is being led by your desires is sometimes the very thing we have the desire for.
mm,
That's adaptive
yeah,
too. That's completely biological. The reason we
yeah,
like sex is because the genes want to progress into the future. Not want, like genes don't have who knows what genes think. But the idea is like genes move into the future because we
mm,
procreate. And so there's in things that taste good, high calorie, sugary
mm,
foods is because there was a time when we weren't able to consume as much
yeah,
sugar. And so
yes,
our bodies really desire that. So yeah, that second one was kind of something that you wanted to mention about, and also something that I don't really subscribe to this idea of desire causing suffering, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. Suffering is caused by desire.
Mm.
So we should then say it as reciprocal narrowing is caused by desire. But then I mentioned like what you now mentioned is reciprocal opening could also be caused by desire. And then that was like choose your loves wisely.
Yeah.
Because if you desire beauty, it's platonic love, the way I described the platonic love, which
Mm-hmm.
is not the way that platonic love is according to the dictionary, but the way I experience it. But that is exactly desiring something, eros, that is beautiful and that pulls you towards the beauty, to pulls you to fall towards beauty with a capital B,
Mm-hmm.
something that is good, that pulls you towards good with a capital G.
Yeah.
It's that's anagoge. Like there's no anagoge without desire, without
Yeah.
eros. So and then yeah, you don't want to. It caused by where you become attached, but do attach yourself to something beautiful.
Yeah.
Do attach yourself to something good,
Right.
and so yeah, and that's the other beef I always had with Buddhism. It like the suffering is caused by desire, and then it feels like yeah, you have to. This the cessation of suffering is attainable, but I always heard it like the cessation of suffering is attainable through seizing your desire. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't want to seize my desire. I want to desire.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's yeah. So yeah, but I like the way John reframes it.
Yeah, me too.
It because he says it goes by the way you can become attached, and I want to add then and to what you become attached.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like your choose your loves better than my choose your masters, even though I've been writing now about choosing your master, choosing your player.
Mm-hmm.
So first you have the
Mm-hmm.
player that you identify as, the live player that you identify as. And then
Masters.
yes, yeah. So those things that you serve, because I started to see
Mm.
my life, and my mother's Catholic, so forgive me, but of a life of service. And so
Mm.
that's kind of how I started to live, was as like a servant. And then we had this meetup, and I got to live like a queen in a servant's position, but like, like really experiencing the palace from from a being mode, because I'm there, and yeah, it's like nobody else is
You're
there.
being a queen.
I'm being a queen. I'm living in this queen's home. Yeah.
But as a queen, you washed one of the other queens' feet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I once was in a I can't remember what it's called, but it's some form of circling, authentic relating practice.
Yes.
At the Stoa, and I had this image over and over again of I'm called to bow down. I'm called to bow down, and for me that was I was called to service.
Yeah.
And then one of the women there said, bowing down is the role of the leader, because I can't remember how she said it, but it was because the true leader, which is what Jesus taught, the true leader serves.
Yeah.
That's so if you're called to service, it means you're called to be a queen. You're called to lead. That's what being called to service actually means. So it's beautiful that you experienced it as that then at our gathering, like serving as the queen.
Yes. Also, like Aries came up because we're both Aries sun, and Aries, I always describe now from Robert Hand's horoscope symbols, doesn't want to lead to be a leader. Aries wants to lead for the sake of not being told what to do.
Yes.
I don't want anybody else to tell me, so I'm going to do it my way.
Well, I do choose teachers.
Yes.
But you have to be chosen to be allowed to tell me what to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Don't think you can choose me. I will choose you.
I have agency in this.
And I demand my agency being met. Oh.
The queen speaks.
The mad queen speaks.
Yes.
Sometimes.
I love that there must be a spiraling up because there's a spiraling down.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Anagage being the agency and arena expanding, because we were talking about how Mark Lewis was discussing the reciprocal narrowing. And so that's kind of like reciprocal narrowing when your agency and your arena become so small that they're so limited in option. And it just feels like there's nothing else that one can do, versus the Enagage.
Who you can be.
Yeah.
Who you can be becomes seriously limited.
Yep.
Through reciprocal narrowing. And the influence you exercise on the world becomes seriously limited. On your own little world, even becomes seriously limited.
This makes me realize why it's such a tactic for abusers to isolate someone from their family, from their friends, because they're so limited in who they are. Now I'm just your girlfriend. Whereas before I was somebody's daughter, I was somebody's sister, I was somebody's friend. I've limited myself now to just his perspective of who I am. And that is, an addictive pattern of relationship, codependence. Yeah.
Oy. How do you deal with a complex dynamical system that is acting against you? By cultivating a complex dynamical system that is acting for you. And that is the eightfold. Well, at least one of the options is following the eightfold path.
Yeah.
And he said it twice, and I thought it was beautiful. Beyond the ego self and beyond the everyday world. Again, that beyond. Beyond the ego self. Not exclusive of the ego self, but beyond the ego self and beyond the everyday world. Not exclusive of the everyday world, but beyond it. You use word encompass.
All encompassing. Yeah.
All encompassing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so, I mean, for some reason my mind's going to the two world mythology, and this being the resolution for that you have to like, but I don't know that. I mean, that wasn't what was said in this episode, but that was just where my mind went to, was thinking
like this beyond, this all encompassing, like
Yeah.
the beyond the everyday world,
Yeah.
but not exclusive of the everyday world.
Right.
Like that's what you mean, the two world mythologies.
Yeah,
It's not,
I think so. all
It's
encompassing.
not it's not that there is another world,
Right.
but you play on a stage that's beyond just the everyday world. Not
Yeah.
I think maybe that's why it was so beautiful for me as well, because indeed that's it's not about not this world.
Right.
It's about not this everyday world, not the mundane. Well, mundane, I recently heard in a context that it was beautiful, but not the banal. What is the opposite of sacred? The day job, I almost wanted to say. Not that, but the yeah, the I see it. I see
I
what
always
you're
just do like
talking.
real world in quotes, but I don't
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's why I actually prefer the everyday world,
Yeah.
because
Everyday world is good.
the everyday world is also real,
Yeah.
but there's something beyond the everyday world,
Yeah.
indeed. And
Yeah.
then there doesn't have to be a real and an unreal or the supra real or anything of that. It's just the everyday world and then the sacred world or
Mhm.
the world beyond the everyday. I like that. Yeah, I see what nicely picked up, Sarah.
I'm not I don't know what you're talking about, but I like it. I like the way
I'm
that
talking
you
about what you talked about. I'm just repeating you to yourself. Yeah.
beautiful. Um yeah, well. I mean, it's closing out here for me. I really like, and I wanted to quote this, you should feel threatened, and you added, because it was said, encouraged, so that you enact the process of moving towards enlightenment rather than asserting propositions that are largely inert. Because of that realization of life being threatened by the dukkha, by dukkha.
Yeah.
Probably no article in front of that, just dukkha.
Well, you can put an article in front of everything if you want to make it superior.
I think as we go on this series, we're going to continue to have little tiny asides like that on everything we say, because that's what John does. So we're developing that. Like it can take so long to say the simplest thing, but it's great. I love it.
It's because he's so thorough. He's so incredibly thorough.
Yeah.
I sometimes feel like I notice for me some things seem so obvious that I just go there immediately, and he refuses to do that
Yeah.
because he wants to really walk carefully the way,
Yeah.
which is that's the more stable way to walk, of course, and
Yeah. Yeah.
probably you expose yourself to less rug pull moments if you
Walk slowly.
weave the rug with such caution. But
Yeah.
I am not naturally inclined to that.
Or like chaos. I am an agent of chaos.
I like flying to conclusions. Never mind jumping to conclusions. I just
Even if
fly
I
to them.
fall. Yeah.
I fall to conclusions.
It's like falling with style. Whenever Buzz Light or whatever on Toy Story, Woody says
Yeah.
that to Buzz Lightyear, or Buzz Lightyear says that to Woody. It's like, I'm not flying, I'm falling with style.
It sounds like a thing Buzz would say. I
Yeah.
think Buzz Lightyear. Mm.
Well, got anything to add to the end of this one? Any culminating messages?
Maybe a short quote again from Epicurus, and I read it last time, but I want to read it again because I think it's relevant. A philosopher's words are empty if they do not heal the suffering of mankind. For just as medicine is useless if it does not remove sickness from the body, so philosophy is useless if it does not remove suffering from the soul.
Nice. Yeah, it's like, that's the point. Oh, and speaking of, because there's so many opportunities to philosophize with us, the Stoa after Socrates meets at noon Eastern time on Sundays. So be sure to join us there. And with all that being said, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Mwah.